In this focus video for AP Biology or College Biology, we're going to be focusing in a little bit more on Unit 2, Cell Structure and Function. More specifically, we're going to be talking about Section 2.7, which is all about facilitated diffusion. Please note the disclaimer below, and let's get started. Now, previously, we talked about the different types of membrane transports. There is a video related to that. If you haven't seen it, feel free to check it out. This is the section 2.6, and it talks about the different types of transport. Now, we're going to be focusing on passive transport, which is the opposite of active transport. And if you remember, we talked about this is my person. And they're in an airport treadmill, I like to call them, where the treadmill goes in one direction and you go in the same direction. So you're not really exerting any energy. So in passive transport, there is no energy required, just like that airport mentioning that we have the airport treadmill and we're going in the same direction. Because of this, we're moving along the concentration gradient. We're moving in the same direction. Now, with passive transport, we talked about different types. One of the types we talked about is facilitated diffusion. And facilitated diffusion is unique because it requires some sort of protein to help facilitate the movement of ions or substances from areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. To get more in detail, there are two different types, main types of proteins that are involved in facilitated diffusion. The first one is channel proteins. Now, channel proteins provide this tube-like structure that we're going to go in more detail in just a second that allow for the environment to be okay for the items on one side to go to the other side. It still goes from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration, but the goal is to avoid this hydrophobic area in here. And that is why they have proteins. They channel them through while avoiding the hydrophobic arena. So you might want to think of a tunnel. Like if you were in a tunnel of some sort under a bridge, you basically are trying to avoid what's above or what's below. And that's the same idea of a channel protein. It has the same functionality and same process. In opposite, there are what's called carrier proteins. And carrier proteins allow ions to go from one section, higher concentration, to lower concentration with this assistance of movement from the protein itself. When we talk about channel proteins, we're talking about the idea of avoiding the hydrophobic environment that the phospholipid bilayer provides internally in the bilayer itself. So what we mean by that is usually, let's say that there's a high concentration internally within the cell, and it has to then go to an area of lower concentration. By that, I mean molecules have to go from areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. However, we know that those molecules themselves are hydrophilic, which means that they love water. And the thing is, in the internal environment, it's hydrophobic, which means that we don't like water. And so these water-loving particles will not be able to flow as easy than if they use some sort of channel protein. The channel protein provides a barrier, sort of like a tunnel, to prevent the internal environment from the external environment of the hydrophobic tendencies. So the channel protein allows for that movement. An example of this is aquaporins, and this is why we say that sometimes we can think of osmosis as a form of facilitated diffusion, because osmosis is the transportation of water using specific proteins called aquaporins, which allows for water to transfer easily through the membrane with the assistance of these specific proteins that are made for water. Another example is gated ion channel proteins. I want you to think of these little circles here as Na plus. And let's say that there's another channel protein located on the other side, and that one wants to pass along K plus. So we have what's called a sodium potassium pump, in this case where the channel protein brings along Na and K along for the ride through channel proteins. This is unique for things like nerve cells or any sort of red blood cell. This is where you would utilize a channel protein. Now, a carrier protein is also associated with facilitated diffusion where you're utilizing a protein. However, the unique part is the shape. So what happens is the protein itself will fix its shape to assist in providing an enclosure for the molecule to pass through to allow for areas of protein to give for movement of areas of higher concentration to areas of lower concentration. So basically what happens is it will fold into the shape of that molecule to allow for easy passage. Now, it is slower than a channel protein, but the benefit of this is that it provides an easy way for a water-loving molecule, a hydrophilic molecule, to pass through the concentration gradient with ease and not much resistance. So yes, the rate is slower because it has to come up with the shape itself, but a carrier protein also means that it's going to allow for the environment to be easy for the molecules to pass through. Now, let's talk about active transport. Now, active transport is the opposite of passive transport. And we've just spoken about facilitated diffusion, which is noted as being a form of passive transport. And we just spoke about carrier and the carrier proteins or the channel proteins that are two different types of facilitated diffusion proteins. Now, with active transport, the thing that we're looking for here is ATP. ATP means energy. And what happens is we have the same proteins in active transport that we do in facilitated diffusion. However, it is facilitated or it is assisted with ATP. So that's the unique part about active transport. And remember, when we think of ATP, we think energy, we think A, active, and it moves against the natural concentration gradient. An example is the sodium potassium pump if it's utilizing some sort of ATP. The previous picture that I showed was not utilizing ATP. Because this is utilizing ATP, we know that the specific sodium potassium pump requires some sort of energy. And because of this, this is considered active transport. Now, you can have what's called a secondary active transport, which means that you're using energy from another substance to help with the gradient. So, for example, you can think of there might be a molecule inside that produces ATP, then provides that for this specific protein to then have ATP of some sort to assist. So that is active transport if it's a secondary active transport. Now let's take a moment to see if we can complete a quiz and see what our answer is. Take a moment and pause this video while reading this question. Once completed, let's review together. Okay, now that you're done reading the question, let's read the question together, which basically says, which of the following biological processes requires the direct input of ATP? Is it A, active transport of sodium ions across the membrane, specifically a cell membrane, B, passive diffusion of water through aquaporins, C, countercurrent heat exchange in a whale's flippers, or D, facilitated diffusion of potassium ions in a neuron? And the best answer for this is A. Because the question talks about ATP, we favor answer choice A because it talks about active transport, and it seems to be also favoring the sodium potassium pump, which is a type of active transport because it utilizes ATP to pass along those specific ions. Now, they don't mention potassium here. That doesn't matter. They do mention active transport, and that's what supersedes this specific answer as being a great answer. Now, with answer choice B, it talks about passive diffusion. Remember, that is the opposite of active diffusion and does not require any sort of ATP. And so we would disregard that as a potential answer. Countercurrent heat exchange, while it requires ATP, the thing is it's not a direct form, and therefore this would not be a favorable answer as well. Facilitated diffusion, remember, is a type of passive diffusion, which means that it does not require energy. And once again, remember, it is talking about potassium ions, similar to a sodium potassium pump. So yes, you can have sodium and potassium ions passing through a essentially a protein, but because it doesn't require ATP and because of the scenario, D is not a favorable answer. So this question teaches you two things. One, to make sure to associate ATP with active transport, and two, to understand that if you're given a sodium and potassium ion, not to just directly think that it's associated with a sodium potassium pump, which is affiliated with active transport, as the answer choice in D states that they're talking about potassium ions potentially through some sort of protein. While that might be the case, they don't have any sort of ATP associated with facilitated diffusion, and that's why D isn't the direct perfect answer. C also is counterfeit in the answer choice because it talks about indirect ways of ATP, and we're trying to look for direct input. So that's why C wouldn't be favored, and D, once again, is just the opposite of active transport, which is passive. So I hope this helps. If you like videos like this year or any year that you're studying for any sort of biology course, make sure to subscribe, like the video, as we hope to create new content for the new year. Hey, Geeking Out on STEM family, guess what? We want you to hit that subscribe button. Why? Because we'll be producing more content just like this for the AP Biology exam and the new digital SAT exam. By subscribing, you'll be getting exclusive, up-to-date tips, tricks, and secrets for both exams. Also, if you're a parent, a teacher, a homeschool instructor, or a student, you might be looking for affordable and exclusive digital products to help improve multiple choice questions, free response questions, or question bank questions related to both the digital SAT or AP Biology exam. We have them here. Make sure to check out our link tree in our bio for curated resources that you won't find anywhere else. These unique resources are designed to help you raise your score. By hitting the subscribe button, the more subscribers we get, by the way, the more videos we can make. So make sure to join our family to ensure that you get a perfect score for both exams. We can't wait to help you succeed.